Hello and welcome to PIL Webinar 67, Cutting Through the Turkey, an SNT protest tutorial. Ooh, turkey. David, it is almost Thanksgiving. What are you going to bring to Thanksgiving dinner?
Sweet potatoes, Scott. Every year I make sweet potatoes. Now, how about you? What's your favorite dish to make?
I am a big fan of pumpkin pie. It's a little traditional, I know, especially coming from an innovation coach, but I just love pumpkin pie. And you know, traditions are okay, but sometimes you need innovations because that's when you end up with deep fried turkey.
That's right, Scott. So on this webinar, you're going to learn some great recipes for success that you can apply to your next procurement. But before we start cooking up this awesome webinar, we have some brief housekeeping to take care of first. So first, sign in with your full name and DHS email address using the chat pod to prove you attended this webinar and get your credit. If you didn't type your name and email address in the chat pod, when you enter the seminar room, please go ahead and type that in now. For example, david.jablonski@hq.dhs.gov. If you registered or didn't register in advance of today's webinar, just go ahead and do the same process. Type in your full name and email address in the chat pod. If you did not register on CSOD, you will need to track your CLPs you earned today manually. If you are on the phone only, then please email us at pil@hq.dhs.gov sometime today, and we will confirm your attendance for credit. If you do not type your email in the chat pod, then we have no way of adjudicating your attendance for credit, so please do so. If we jump from one pod to the next, you do not need to re-enter your name again. We will have that record in Adobe. If you type your email once, then you're good. Now, for a quick orientation for those who haven't attended before, or if it's been a while. In the bottom right corner, we have the chat box. Not only is this where you type in your full name and DHS email address for credit, it's also where you can submit your questions at any time. We have dedicated PIL staff monitoring the questions, so please don't leave a question in your hip pocket. We don't want this to be a one-way conversation where the audience asks the PIL questions. We encourage you all to interact with each other. So feel free to respond to your colleagues when there's something you want to address. For those of you who are unable to sign in to Adobe and are on the phone with the PowerPoint slides, you can still participate in the conversation. Email your questions and comments to the PIL inbox at pil@hq.dhs.gov. We have PIL team members standing by to take your questions. On the bottom middle of the screen is where you can find some helpful PIL links. To the top right, you can find the downloads box where you can access and download the documents that we'll be going over today at any time. Just click the upper right-hand drop-down to Download All. You will see some poll questions throughout the presentation, so keep an eye out to be sure to respond. In fact, 2 are up right now for you to respond to. Now finally, there is a full screen option. Just click the square with the 4 little arrows to maximize, and then click it again to minimize. That wraps up the clerical piece items.
Well, and now, previously on the PIL.
Webinar number 66 was titled Fourth Quarter Huddle with the DHS Chief Procurement Officer. This 1-hour webinar featured the DHS Chief Procurement Officer, Paul Courtney, and Deputy CPO, Nina Ferraro. Check out this webinar to get to know your DHS CPO and DCPO, to hear their vision and plan for DHS procurement, and to understand priorities and initiatives for the future. You can find a recording of this webinar on the PIL homepage. On the line with us today, besides Scott and myself, we are joined by Garth White from the Science and Technology Directorate. Garth.
Good morning, everyone.
All right. We also have Carolyn Lethert from the Office of Procurement Operations. Carolyn, can you say hi to everyone?
Hey, everyone.
All right. We'll hear more from them soon. But first, let's go over the poll questions. Okay. So let's see here. How many PIL webinars have you attended? And we have 11% says this is their first, so about 35 people. We have 2 to 4 webinars, about 120 people. Wow, that's a lot. 73 5 to 7 webinars, and 22 for 8 to 10, and over 10. Wow, we have 54 people, Scott, that have over 10 webinars. That's amazing.
Wow.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of webinars, you guys. And then the second one, what is your primary role within the acquisition community? So it's like 119 people, about 38% are CEOs or CSs. We have 140 people, about 45% of the PMs, cores, technical evaluation. That's a big. No attorneys here. Some program analysts, just about 19 people, so about 6%, and about 10% here with other. So a lot of program management people on the phone here. Okay, so we're going to hide those, and we'll come back to those more in just a little bit, so be on the lookout for more polls as we do this today. And now we are extremely lucky to have with us David Ritter, Deputy OPO, Deputy Head of Contracting Activity, to kick us off with a tone from the top. David, thanks for being with us today. Take it away.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm honored to participate in today's event. As you just heard, my name is David Ritter. I'm the new Deputy Executive Director for the Office of Procurement Operations. I'm a former digital information technology acquisition professional program graduate, and also had the distinct privilege of leading the Office of Procurement Operations Information Technology Acquisition Center before assuming my current position. So I'm extremely excited to kick off the Procurement Innovation Lab's 67th webinar because I have a great passion for the acquisition of IT. So today you're going to hear a tremendous story about how a team purchased IT in support of the Science and Technology Directorate. The team used a suite of innovations, including advisory down selects, oral presentations, confidence ratings, and on-the-spot consensus. So innovations are similar to a Thanksgiving meal. There are many different sides or activities to choose from, and it's important to select what's right for your taste or situation. So whether it's an oral presentation, brief proposal submissions, the right innovations contribute to success. They help to reduce risk, and they streamline the process. So in the end, it's up to you as an acquisition professional to know what's right for your project. Now, something else you're going to hear about today is collaboration. So just like a large Thanksgiving meal requires many different hands, you also need help from others to award large-scale procurement. For those of us who help to cook Thanksgiving dinners, we know that bringing various dishes or sides to the dinner is important. In the world of acquisition, all of the partners involved in an acquisition bring their ideas and their experiences to the table. So in the project we're going to focus on today, there was incredible collaboration between the contracting office and the program office. Carolyn, the contracting officer, did a fantastic job preparing the program office for conducting a streamlined acquisition, but the team didn't stop there. The team had early collaboration with the Office of Procurement Operations Acquisition Innovation Advocate and the S&T Office of General Counsel. All this early collaboration contributed to the team's ability to finish the project, evaluation and award, and they were prepared and be prepared when they received the protest. So I'll conclude at this point with a few words about protests. We know as acquisition professionals, anybody involved in a procurement, we can't control whether a vendor protests. However, the possibility of a protest shouldn't deter us or deter you from trying new approaches and taking, those calculated risks. It's almost like trying a new dish during Thanksgiving. The key is to use innovations the right way and work in collaboration with our partners in OGC. So in conclusion, I just want to let you know, again, I don't want to take any more time. I know Scott and David from the PIL team have a great webinar planned for you today. So in closing, the efficiencies gained by right-sizing, whether it's your quote submission requirements or performing other type of innovations, they will help to shorten the award time frame and then end and reduce barriers to our small business participation. And then ultimately that supports the goal of streamlining the procurement process. And then again, we're here to accomplish the mission. So again, I want to thank Carolyn and Garth in advance for sharing their perspectives today and knowledge with everyone this morning. And thank you again to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to join us for today's webinar. Scott and David, back to you.
David, thanks very much for the inspiring words. We really appreciate having you today. Hope you can stick around for the rest of the webinar. Well, let's jump right into the content. Today we are here to talk about the Science and Technology Information Technology tutorial. It is an SNT protest tutorial, and we've got a full agenda. We're going to go over the introductions. We'll have a webinar refresher before we meet the team and find out what are we buying today. Then we'll talk about some innovations they use specifically for small business. We'll talk about an on-the-spot consensus Thanksgiving edition before we go into the oral presentations, the brief explanations, and all through the process, we're going to talk about those protests and the lessons learned. Now, it's always important to know what lane you're in. So when you're driving down this beautiful fall lane, you have to understand we are in 8.4 here. And 8.4 gives you a lot of flexibility. You have to know what the recipe says before you can start to modify that. So we are in 8.4 here, the Federal Supply Schedule. And we are going to be talking about a lot of innovations. And some of them we have previously covered. You can find a lot of webinars on topics on the PIL's DHS intranet site. Two of the most relevant ones for today are webinar number 47, GAO Perspectives on Procurement Innovations. That covered the GAO perspective on oral presentations, confidence ratings, and down selects, which we're going to talk about again today with this team and get a refresher. You can also see webinar number 50, Team Building, Negotiations, and Overcoming a Protest with the U.S. Coast Guard. There's a lot of themes here with protests going on, but I love that that one talks about the technical demonstration or challenge. It's a variation of the show me, don't tell me approach that Carolyn and Garth used here. So take a look at those. Well, I think it's time that we get cracking. Let's meet our two guests today. Garth White was the contracting officer's representative for this project. Garth, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Good morning again, everyone. My name is Garth White. I have 12 years of federal experience. I'm currently the Chief Operations Officer for the Office of Enterprise Services here at S&T. And my previous roles were Chief Information Security Officer and Engineering Branch Chief. I'm excited to tell our story today. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today, Garth. And Carolyn had the PIL recipe book out. She was whipping up innovations. Carolyn is the contracting officer from the Office of Procurement Operations. Carolyn, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, I am a contracting officer in the Science and Technology Acquisition Division. I actually started as an APCP and have been with OPO about 10 years. Fun fact, most of my work has been in R&D, so this is actually my first big R&D, my first big IT project.
Well, thank you very much for being with here, Carolyn, and we will find out how your first big project went. Now, the S&T team used a lot of innovations here. It was just like innovations were falling from the sky. They had brief proposal submissions. They had oral presentations. On a twist here, they had a firm down select and an advisory down select. So you're going to want to stay with us to find out how they use those. But let's jump into this leaf pile, and we are going to learn about what are they buying. So Garth, in a sentence, what does the Science and Technology Directorate do exactly?
S&T is the R&D proving house for state, local, and industry.
Okay, that's simple. But you don't just work with industry, you also work with all of the DHS components.
That's correct. We also work with all the other federal components, and we have done partnerships in the past.
And so if you're out there, this is not just a headquarters office, this is one that partners with a lot of different DHS components, whether you're at FEMA, whether you're at CBP, you could be working with S&T, maybe you don't even know it. Now, you've got some requirements here. You had 5 functional areas. Tell us about your requirements, Garth.
Yes, we had information security, or InfoSec. We had information security officers that we wanted to secure. We also had application developers in the realm of collaboration services. We did project and program management. We also had system and network engineering services and O&M services.
Sounds like this was like your bulky IT project for like all of S&T.
Yes, correct.
All right. David, I think we've got a poll to go over.
That's right. So we have a poll. This is the question number 3. What procurement innovations can you use with FAR 8.4 procurement? So be sure to check out this poll, and we're going to come to the results in just a bit here.
All right. Now, Garth, we talked about how you had 5 requirements, but it looks like here you combined those 5 requirements into one consolidated big old pie. Why was that important to S&T?
Because we wanted to realize economies of scale. It made no sense for us to continue having these different contracts to service the need and mission of S&T. We did a simple analysis, and from just those 5 contracts, we had 10 to 12 PMs. That is 12 FTEs that we were just paying for to support these contracts. So we decided, let's go down, let's consolidate them down, let's do economies of scale and ease of management.
That sounds fantastic. I love the consolidation approach, especially when you're realizing economies of scale, not just for the sake of consolidation. Carolyn, was there any extra documentation that you had to do in order to consolidate the requirements? What was that like?
So yes, there was. We had to do a consolidation DNS under FAR Part 7 because we were consolidating multiple small business requirements. That DNS had to be signed by the HCA and the CPO, and it involved considerable market research, which actually included quantifying the dollar value of the benefits to the government of the consolidation. Also, because one of the contracts we wanted to consolidate was an 8A, we also had to coordinate that with SBA.
Okay. What was that like working with SBA?
SBA was very responsive to talking about the consolidation, and they really wanted to get into our market research to see what the benefits of the consolidation would be.
Now, when you were talking to SBA, you were talking to them about removing an 8A project from their program. Were you ultimately successful?
We ultimately actually decided it was in our best interest to move forward before we finished the project just because of milestones. But we did actually discover that SBA would be really responsive if you wanted to talk about this issue, and they were available to help coordinate as early in the process as you needed.
That's great to know. So if you ever have questions about a small business project, we've got lots of small business support. You can reach out to our OSDUA, to your small business specialist, and it sounds like SBA. Do you have a big takeaway from SBA you'd like to share with everybody?
I think start early and coordinate with them early along in the process to make sure you're successful.
All right. We're moving on to slide 9 for those who are following along on the phone. This is an overview of the acquisition strategy. Carolyn, can you briefly describe for us what were you doing here?
So we were doing a small business set-aside on the GSA multiple award schedule. And we did this as a 3-phase solicitation. So our first phase was a facility security clearance check. Basically, contractors needed to have a top secret facility security clearance, and they submitted basically their name and CABES code. We rated them pass-fail if they had the clearance or not. The second phase was demonstrated corporate experience with reference check, and that was followed by an advisory down select. The third phase was oral presentation along with key personnel information and price. The quoters had to submit their oral presentation slides, a key personnel resume, and a price proposal, and then they did an oral presentation.
Awesome. That's a lot of innovations here. We're going to step through it one step at a time. Let's jump right now into something that I think is important. We're talking about the small business program. Before we do that, let's go over a poll.
That's right. So that poll question 3, what procurement innovations can you use with FAR 8.4 procurement? And we have here oral presentations, interactive dialogue. A lot of people answer that question, which is great. Highest technically rated with a fair and reasonable price. About 39 people said that, and this is one that could be used under there as well, under the right circumstances. Confidence ratings, yes, that can be used. Technical demonstrations and challenges, again, yes, this can be used under FAR 8.4. Discover or down selects, yes, that can be used, and on-the-spot consensus. All of these can be used on there. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we proceed with this procurement.
I'll add one there. My favorite part about 8.4 is the language that says you shall ask for a price reduction, and it's at any point in the process. So at any time there, whether you're in solicitation, negotiation, or even exercising a BPA auction, you can ask for a price reduction. The 8.4 says that you can. All covered there. One of my favorite things. It's not even innovative. It's in the FAR. All right. Let's move along now to slide 10. Now, you might say this was a small business set aside, but I don't think that was actually very small. This was a $111 million small business set aside as a BPA, and you used some particular innovations here to engage small business better. Tell us about that, Carolyn.
We started with an industry day fairly early in our process, and we actually gave priority registration to small business registrants for that industry day. At that industry day, we had program office representatives explain each of the 5 different function areas of the requirement, and then we also, at the same time we were doing the industry day, did an RFI to get industry feedback on the requirement. Further along in the process, we posted a draft solicitation, and we posted status updates on GSA eBuy as we were moving along. And we did a multi-phased approach with down selects to make sure we weren't asking for too much information at once.
You all just did a little bit of communication beforehand with small business, just a little bit. This is a lot of pre-planning there. And as we walk through, remember these, think about them as we go through. We've got some comments from vendors at the end about how successful these were. Spoiler, they were successful. But Garth, you mentioned that you asked a really important question when you were at the industry day. What was that question you asked to vendors?
Yes, we wanted to really partner with industry. And the question that we had for industry was, could this be done underneath one award? And our industry responded, yes, it could be done with partnerships. Therefore, our proof of concept was accurate, so we moved forward with it.
I think that's fantastic. Talking to industry about their preferences, talking to them ahead of time so that they see this is coming out. One of the comments we're going to see is that sometimes vendors feel like it's a black hole until all of a sudden the solicitation pops out, and that's the first time they see it. They can't say that here. Carolyn and her team did so much pre-planning, and especially asking them, the experts, hey, how is this consolidation going to go? Is it going to work? I just think that's fantastic. All right. Garth, we got 34 quotes here, or you got 34 quotes here for the phase 1. Phase 1, to remind everyone, was that facility clearance. Why was that important to the program office?
That was very important to us because some of the scope that we deal with are classified up to the TS-SCI level. So we wanted to make sure that the awardee was able to do the work on award. So we wanted to ensure that they had it because we all know that getting a cage code after award is going to take a long time, and we were ending multiple contracts to consolidate down on this BPA.
Now, Garth, from your introduction, I know that you are an expert in many things. Are you an expert in facility clearance?
No, I am not.
So, Carolyn, what did you do here? Who did you coordinate with to evaluate your facility clearance?
So we actually asked the S&T Office of Security to help us evaluate. And going into the evaluation process, we went to the S&T Office of Security and Headquarters Security and talked to them about what we needed to ask for to get the information we wanted. And as it turned out, all we really needed to ask for was the name and the cage code of, in our case, the prime, the lead CTA partner, or the lead joint venture partner.
I think that's fantastic. I think it's just important for so many things, right? And the first thing is that you went to the person who was going to be doing the evaluation to ask them, what do we need to evaluate? I mean, if you hadn't done that, you could have asked for all this stuff, and security was like, I just need this and this, and you asked for all these other things, and you beefed up cost over here. I just think that's amazing. You coordinated with the Office of Security beforehand. How fast, so you got 34 quotes, how fast did the Office of Security evaluate those 34 phase 1 quotes?
They did it in 2 days.
2 days? That's super fast. Now, we're just talking about the cage and the name because that's, security said that's all they needed. But think about that. That's so fast. 2 days. They engaged with them beforehand to really get to know what they needed, and then they moved along. All right, David, I think we've got a poll up that may talk about this.
That's right. Have you ever used multiple or different evaluation teams for phased evaluation? So let's see some of these answers here. We have about 10% that's saying, yes, I have done this several times. We have a few people that said, yes, but it did not go well. That's interesting. Then we had a lot of people that said, no, I have not done this before. So a lot of people haven't actually used this, and some people have actually never thought about using multiple evaluation teams. So it is something you can do. This is a great story about how that worked as well.
Carolyn, we got a question in the chat that asked about the response parameters for phase one. All you asked for was the name and the cage code.
Name and cage code.
How many pages was that response?
1.
1 page. I mean, it's got their name in like 50-point font and their cage in like 45-point font. That's it, people. That's super easy. When we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you coordinated with both the S&T Office of Security and the DHS Headquarters Office of Security. Is that a recommendation that you'd suggest to people out there?
Definitely. It was really helpful, and then the security office who ended up doing the evaluation knew it was coming and knew it was in a format they could use.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, let's move on to slide number 12. Now, slide number 12 is you received 34 quotes in phase one, and like we heard, security evaluated that. One of them was removed for being non-compliant, and that left 33 that were moved into phase two. But of those 33, only 26 actually decided to submit a phase two quote. That's the firm down select. That's their choice, right? It was towards the end of the year. Maybe they decided to do something else, whatever it is. That's fine. Your second factor was demonstrated prior experience, and we have an example on the screen here. Garth, how did you come up with these questions?
So our evaluation team consisted of subject matter experts in each one of the areas. So we really wanted to make sure we only asked just enough information that was needed to give us a thumbs up or thumb down that they could move on to the next phase. So partnering with OPO and the PIL, we came up with 2 questions per area that we thought was the essence of what is needed to demonstrate prior experience and success in each phase.
Now, if you look at these two, these are what we call interview-style questions. So you can see the question here. This is an actual example, question number 7 from functional area, I'm doing math here, 3. Describe your experience successfully managing a help desk that delivered timely, responsive, and quality service to end users. What methodologies and techniques enabled you to successfully provide that support? That's what's called an interview-style question. It's very, common. Anyone can understand that. It's not real technical, and it helps for a couple of things, right? The first thing it does is it lasers in on what is the most important issue here. Here it's successfully managing a help desk with timely, responsive, and quality service. It also helps because the vendors then can really write to that. They can see, they can understand that, they know that it's important to us. So when they write to that, they can write really well. And when they write well to something, that means we can evaluate it well in addition to that. So that's fantastic. Garth, you had 2 questions per area. So you've got 2 questions in 5 areas. That's 10 questions. Was that enough for the evaluators to evaluate and get a good sense of everybody?
Yes, it was. It worked out very well for us.
Do you wish you had more questions, or that's just perfect?
That we had more questions to begin with, but we really boiled down to the essence of what we really needed to evaluate quickly and move on to the next phase.
Perfect. 26 quotes here. Let's keep that number in mind as we roll forward into slide 13. Here, your phase 2 was demonstrated corporate experience. That's like a pumpkin pie, but you had a bit of a different flavor here. You had a pecan pie as well, Carolyn, because you did call references, and that's slightly different. So tell us about that. How'd that go?
Yeah, so in addition to the 10 corporate experience questions, we requested 3 to 5 references that could confirm the level and quality of the experiences submitted for each quoter. What we did was we set up a call with each reference, and on that call, we went through a set list of questions. And that list of questions we'd actually provided with the RFQ, so everyone knew it was coming.
So a lot of great things here. They provided the questions ahead of time, so everyone was on board with that. There were no surprises, and they were confirming the corporate experience. So this was not past performance. Maybe it had a slightly different flavor than a corporate experience we're used to, but this was not past performance. Were any of the reference questions more impactful than others?
Yeah, one I thought was particularly helpful was we asked if the references had encountered any performance problems and if they were satisfied and resolved in a timely manner. And I think this question really provided a little bit more insight on the quality of performance that was provided, and it got a bit more commentary than just a yes or no answer.
Yeah, I really like that. And were there any instances that you just weren't able to get in contact with a reference? And if so, what'd you do?
Yes, there absolutely were situations where we couldn't get a hold of references. We actually tried to mitigate the risk here by noting in the RFQ when we expected to do the reference checks and suggesting that quoters notify their references of this timing, but we still had references we couldn't get a hold of, and we knew that was going to be the case. We developed a training for all of the reference checkers that had written procedures for what we were going to do in a given situation, including not being able to get a hold of a reference. Basically what we did is we tried to get a hold of the reference at least twice, once via email, once via phone. And if they weren't available still, we just didn't complete a survey for that reference.
But everyone had the time available. Like they knew, hey, we're going to call references probably within this week. Get your references available. I love that communication there. And if you weren't able to get a hold of a reference, did that have an impact on the evaluation?
No, it actually didn't. We gave the TET all of the completed reference check questionnaires for each quoter once we finished them, and we gave that to them along with the proposal, and the TET was merely instructed that what they received was what was in compliance with the RFQ, and that's what they needed to evaluate, and only what was there.
Perfect. Now we do have a question in the chat from Keisha Reed. She asks, what makes a difference here from past performance? And the difference really is that we're verifying the experience here. We're not getting into that past performance lane. We're not going into CPARs. We're not talking about the quality. That's separate and distinct, right? This is just checking to see that they had that experience. So we're asking that other follow-up question, were there any problems and what they do, right? But that doesn't stray too much into the quality area, the past performance evaluation. And I know, Carolyn, you worked really hard with a lot of teams to make sure that you didn't get into that.
Yes, we did. And we wanted to make sure we could use confidence ratings to evaluate it as well.
Right. Yep. So they did a lot of things here. Now, when you were calling references, was it just you?
It was not just me. I had some fantastic help. I worked at the time in a branch of about 11 people, and every last one of them helped me with my reference checks. We actually divided into 5 teams, split up the reference checks, and did it all over 3 days.
3 days. Wow. You guys were really moving along. Now, your phase 2 quotes were brief, but considering you were asking 2 questions for 5 functional areas, that's still 13 pages. So 20, I'm doing math here. I know it's still early in the morning, but I got my copy here. 26 quotes of 13 pages each is 338 pages plus the reference checks. That gets to be kind of a lot. Garth, how did you evaluate all of those?
Yeah, we took the approach of evaluating them in batches, and we leveraged technology. We used Microsoft Teams. We all got together, and we used the waterfall approach and came to consensus on each one.
I love that waterfall approach. Tell me more about that.
Yes, it was great. Since we were doing this during the middle of the pandemic, we were on Teams, so we all, through Carolyn's help, we all got together after each step. We just stopped and said, okay, we're going to vote, and we voted all at the same time. That way, we didn't influence one another, and we just came to consensus before we moved on.
That's awesome. So this is a good thing. Waterfall in IT, bad thing. Waterfall in voting and on the spot, good thing. We'll make that distinction here. And did you evaluate all together? There's a lot of different batches here. So how did you evaluate that?
There were about 10 in each batch, and we did it randomly, and we went through each batch.
Now 10 here, let's follow the math again, get your coffee ready. 10 quotes times 13 pages is 130 pages. That's still kind of a lot for a batch, but that worked for this team. What we recommend for teams is start with 1. If 1 is working okay, maybe go to 2 or 3. If that's working okay, then go to 5, and then just kind of go from there, because an on-the-spot consensus, these are just guidelines, right? The point of the on-the-spot consensus is to do it immediately and to do it together. And so work with your team don't keep doing something that's not working for your team. The 10 here worked for Garth's team, but you do what works for your team. We talked about the waterfall approach. Who kind of coordinated this whole thing for you? Were you the lead, or?
Carolyn, it was we teamed together to coordinate the approach.
I can tell, and I could tell during it too, that you all work really well as a team together. I think that's just something that really comes through. Now, the PIL finds that an on-the-spot consensus can really help to reduce fatigue, and it's a lot easier for everyone to evaluate. So was that your experience and your team's experience, Garth?
Absolutely. That was one of the things I really kept in mind from doing several proposals in the past. Reviewed fatigue is a real thing. So we wanted to make sure that we reviewed in batches and through consensus, and that ensured that we evaluated each proposal to a standard versus against each other.
Awesome. Now, Carolyn, how did you send over the batches? Some people might have done it alphabetically. Some people might have done it first in, first out. Some people might have used, I don't know, Roman numerals. How did it work for you?
So we basically, once we got a reference check package completed, we would send it to the tech team along with the relevant corporate experience question, but we didn't send them first in, first out. I created an order that was basically randomized. I made sure it wasn't alphabetical, I made sure the incumbents were spread out, and I tried to make it so that the tech team would just be evaluating without thinking about what was coming next. And
Awesome.
Worked out well.
That's great.
Now, we have a question here in the chat. Pretty easy one. How many evaluators did you have?
It's 5 evaluators.
5 evaluators. All right. Thanks, Brenda, for that question.
How did that work out for you? We get a lot of times questions from teams. What's the right number? How did 5 work for you all?
It just so happened there were 5 areas, 5 subject matter experts. It just worked out for us.
That's perfect. I like that. I hadn't made that connection with back to the functional areas. That's really great. I like that a lot. Okay. And then how did your team go about performing all of those reference checks together, Carolyn?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, my entire branch helped, and about 11 of us did this. We all blocked off our calendars for about the 3 days that we did this, divided the reference checks across the branch based on when the references were available and when the checkers were available, and we did it all in about 3 days.
All right. We've got another question here. Tasha asks, could you have performed the reference checks under a separate past performance factor?
So we could have done reference checks with past performance or with corporate experience. I believe you could do either.
Yeah. So here you all did the corporate experience, and you focused on just kind of verifying and validating the corporate experience. You were trying not to stray into that past performance realm because y'all didn't think it was going to be value added.
Correct.
Yeah. And so that's, something that you can discuss with your team about what factors are going to be value added. You want to look for distinguishing factors and discriminating factors. And if past performance isn't going to add anything, then go with your corporate experience. Maybe like here, you just want to check to verify, did they actually do this work? It's like if I've got my 2 daughters and I go up and I say, did you clean your room or did your sister help? I'm just verifying who did the work. Right? I'm not asking, well, how clean is the room? But Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We have another question, Scott. And now, Carolyn, did you or your team get intermittent feedback from an attorney after the first 1 or 2 evaluation reports was created? Or what was that interaction like with your attorney advisor?
I would say we had continuous feedback with both our attorney and with our policy QAB advisor throughout the entire process.
So what we recommend a lot of times is when you're doing it on the spot to do 1 or 2 and then to send those up the chain for review. Is that something similar to what you all did here?
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback midway through the process, yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm hearing too that there's a lot of cogs in the wheel. Did you all do a little bit of pre-planning?
A few months, yes.
A few months, yeah. There was a lot of pre-planning here. All right, so you had 26 quotes in phase 2. How many of those 26 did you advise, because we're into the advisory down select now, how many did you advise to move into the final phase, Carolyn?
5.
Just 5. Now, I've got copy here, but I can't do the math on that. That is less than 1/5 of the total vendors. That seems like an amazing down select. What made you decide on 5 vendors?
So the 5 we picked were really the quotas that we thought were going to be likely to be able to meet the entire requirement and who we thought would be successful at it.
Okay, so this is just kind of what came out of the evaluations. And Garth, was there a consensus among the consensus of these are the top 5, these are the ones we want to move forward?
Yes, it was. We had no pre-described number of ones that we wanted to move forward with. It just worked out. There were 5 that were able to handle the size, scope, and complexity of this procurement.
Did you ever consider throwing in a 6 just because, or maybe doing 4?
No, because we did on-the-spot consensus. That's what came out.
That's awesome. And that's normally what we like to say. You know, in the solicitation, you should have, you know, a number there, but use some of those weasel words, which we're going to hear about in a second. The government intends to advise approximately 3 to 5. You know, if you would say, I intend to advise approximately 4, is anyone going to say that 5 isn't approximately 4? You know? Or if you get down there and you say 3, okay, well 3 is still approximately 4. You've got their number in there. And it's really helpful for vendors to see that number in the solicitation because then they know their probability to win, their P-win number. They know that they've got about a 1 in 5 chance. That's 20%. That's a good chance of winning for them. They will put more money into the effort. And when they put more money into the effort, you get a better quality proposal. So I love that. We've got another question in the chat.
That's right. It's from Michael. How long did the pre-solicitation documentation take? You know, being this is such a large requirement, how long did it take you guys to do the pre-solicitation documentation?
So we did do a lot of planning. I would say probably it took us maybe 5 months of planning, getting all the signatures and all the high-level DNS signed.
We find too at the PIL here that, you know, we track a lot of data. We're data heads. The longer a team is in that planning phase, the faster and the better the solicitation to award phase goes. So it's okay to take your time, plan it out, do it right. It's like my father used to say, right? You measure twice and cut once. So you do that planning, and then you're good to go. All right, David, I think that we are at our first protest now. Dum, dum, dum.
That's right. So just like the webinar entails, you received 2 protests on your award. Now, the first protest issue was about your application of confidence ratings during Phase 2 corporate experience. So the protester basically alleges that the awardee shouldn't have received a high confidence. They said if you compare how we received a high confidence and how the awardee received a high confidence, it's not the same. What did GAO say about that, Scott?
First, I do want to mention this was a post-award protest, so this came in after award. This did not come in between the phases, right? If it came in between the phases, we've got good case law that says it would be dismissed as untimely, that they had, this was a post-award issue, a post-award protest. We're just putting it here because we've just talked about Phase 2, so we wanted to talk about the Phase 2 protest issue here. When the GAO looked at this issue, yeah, they looked at what did the TET, the evaluation team, actually say in their report. And you can see some of that highlighted in the middle there. It says, the qualitative benefits of the strengths increased confidence to a much greater extent than the weaknesses decreased confidence. And that kind of justified their high confidence. The GAO was good with that. They said, the protester here is trying to establish their own quote as a template, and that's not what it's about. The ratings are just a guide for intelligent decision making, and we obviously have some intelligent people here that are making that decision. So the TET's findings that the awardee's corporate experience was also high confident compared to the protester, that was okay. The GAO denied this protest issue. Carolyn, when the protest came in, how did you respond to it?
So yeah, in our response, we focused on the point that the protester was really trying to substitute their judgment for that of the TET, and that both the awardee and the protester's quotations actually met the RFQ definition of high confidence.
Yep, that's awesome, and that's exactly the right thing to do, right? Confidence ratings are so flexible. It's like the scales here say there's not two different, there can be different types of high confidence. We get asked all the time, are two high confidence the same? Are they equal? What was your answer to that here?
No, not everyone rated high confidence is exactly the same. Different quotations have different benefits to the government, and our documentation reflected that. The reason we did a trade-off analysis here was to evaluate the qualitative benefits of each of these quotations and take price into account.
Yeah, the GAO in other cases has said you have to go beyond the rating and look at the substantive findings, and that's exactly what the team did here. They did it A+, and it was supported by the GAO here in this combined decision. All right, we're moving into the third and final phase now. In this phase, you've got just 5 vendors for oral presentations. Carolyn, tell us about that third factor.
Okay, so the third factor was oral presentations and key personnel. So we asked for a key personnel resume for the BPA program manager, who was one of the people who was giving the presentation. And then the oral presentation itself consisted of 5 prepared questions, and the questions had time limits and limits on the number of slides. And then there was also an on-the-spot question where we gave the quoters a description of what the question will be about, but not the question itself. Quoters also submitted pricing information, and oral presentations actually started a couple of days after we received all of this documentation.
Awesome. Now, you gave them a lot of information here. You said for each question you had a slide limit and a time limit, and that's a judgment call that the team made here. They wanted to be comfortable with that. They could have also said, hey, we just have 20 slides in general for 1 hour. You split it up as you want to. That's okay too. It's, again, whatever your team is most comfortable with. We do have a question here about the 5 quotes. Tasha asks, no one chose to proceed despite the advice not to? You had 26 vendors here.
Correct. They all followed our advice.
There you go. 20, let's see, I got to do some more math here. You didn't know this was going to be a math one, right? You all thought this was going to be a legal one. You got to do some math here. 21 out of 21 vendors followed the advice and did not proceed. It was a really good down select here, I think. Now, in phase 2, we talked about demonstrated prior experience and how you were using those interview style questions. It wasn't just like a buckshot, tell me about all that turkey. And you used the same thing here.
Yeah. So we had 5 questions, and they were generally about the quota's approach to quality, their sample task order staffing approach, their sample task order technical approach, their approach to a business management office, and how they would advance IT across the enterprise using Satara and TBM. So each of the questions actually had specific sub-elements that we wanted to make sure that quoters discussed. And the evaluators had a checklist as part of the evaluation process to make sure that the quoters actually discussed everything they were supposed to.
And you can see it highlighted here a little bit about what that interview style question looks like for an oral presentation. The quoter shall demonstrate how they would drive OCIO's advancement of IT across the enterprise. That's something specific. It's narrow. It talks about something that's important to Garth's mission. It goes on to say, it should include the modernization goals as they described by Satara, some of your technical business stuff, access maturity, lots of different stuff here that they want to see in there because that's important to Garth's mission. Garth, what did the evaluators think of the oral presentations?
We loved it. It was excellent. We took the time to really come up with real thoughtful questions, and we just wanted to get to the crust of the issue, the meat of the proposals. So we really enjoyed the oral presentation. It really streamlined the process for us. And again, I hate to keep it, there is such a thing as evaluation fatigue, and it really kept everything streamlined. We leveraged technology again to do this, so it worked out very well for us.
It sounds like instead of fatigue, you had a different F word here. You had fun.
Yes, we had fun doing it.
Yeah. And was 3 hours the right amount of time?
Yeah, we debated about it. Everything was planned out in this. We planned everything out, and we had backups to the backup plan. So it worked out very well.
And again, this is what this team decided. They had a lot of conversations about what the right amount of time was. So if you're considering oral presentations, talk about that with your team. What's the right amount of time? Plan out how long you're going to have the vendors present. Plan out how long you're going to have interactive dialogue. Maybe you want to use some weasel words. Maybe it's about 3 hours. Maybe it's up to 3 hours. Think about those kind of things as you're planning it out. Give somebody a call. Talk through it. Now you had two different kinds of questions here. You had the prepared questions. You had 5 prepared questions that you gave them in the RFQ. And then you had the one on the spot question, which I love. What was more impactful to the team?
I think both were very impactful because, again, we really took the time to develop the questions and really narrowly focused on what we wanted. And we had checklists with us to make sure that we graded or evaluated everyone fairly. In addition to that, we wanted to put on a on-the-spot question, which really what we wanted to see from the evaluation team is the ability for them to be nimble and leverage all different facets of this procurement. And the example was a cyber incident. You lost one of your staff. How would you alert your federal staff? How would you isolate, communicate, evaluate, and keep moving? And it really challenged the team doing the presentation, and I loved it. I will do it again.
I remember that we had a similar team do this for headquarters. It was a cybersecurity one, and it was another kind of worst day scenario, and what would you do kind of thing. And the team walked out, the vendor walked out of the room, and they said to the CEO, man, that was really fun. I liked that. But you just get so much good experience out of this. You get to see, the key personnel, how they think on their feet, how they are going to respond to a real world scenario. And I love here, Carolyn, that you included in the RFQ just a flavor of what it was going to be, right? It's going to be a cybersecurity event. That lets them know, okay, I need to bring a cyber person into the room with me so that I'm prepared to answer that. And they can't say later on, oh, well, if I'd known if it was a cyber event, I would have brought different personnel. David, I think we've got a question.
Yeah, we got a couple questions here. So MK says, now this is for the on-the-spot question. The same on-the-spot question for each vendor.
Yes.
All right, and that's standard out there. We usually say that these questions, the on-the-spot, the ones in the solicitation, these are the same, just kind of like you're interviewing someone for a job. They're the same standard set of questions, so you can evaluate them on the same questions as well. We have another one here for Chad saying, can you share the questions and solicitation with attendees? You can find that in the downloads pod right above. So you got the solicitation up there, and you should be able to find those questions in the solicitation, the ones that are in there. Is that correct, Carolyn?
Yes, the questions are on the solicitation, aside from the on-the-spot one.
Perfect, excellent. And actually, I have a question. So my question is, so you asked these 5 questions and one on the spot from the vendors. Was there any other information that was asked for from the vendors in addition to this, or is it just the questions itself?
Just the question itself.
Okay, and the reason why I was thinking about that is because I know a lot of times people out there ask for a technical approach, they ask for a management plan, maybe key personnel resumes. Did any of that cross your mind? Did you want any of that as part of it when you're planning for this?
We considered it, but again, we wanted them to show them how they would execute on things versus giving us reams of management speak and technical jargon. We wanted to see how they would handle the day-to-day. And we really took a lot of time and working with the PIL and working with OPO to really make sure that we got the essence of what we required and no fluff. We really wanted to meet. So.
And would you say at the end of it, asking these set questions that you came up with, did that accomplish
that? For us, yes, because we had multiple questions, but we really boiled it down to really make sure we are only asking the questions that we really needed and that we could use to evaluate.
Perfect. Excellent.
Now, one lesson learned I want to bring up from another team here. This was not the case here because this team did so much planning. I did coach another team where they didn't have the on-the-spot question drafted before the solicitation was released. And afterwards, they realized when they were drafting it, there wasn't enough time for the question they had that they really wanted to ask. So when you're drafting your on-the-spot question, your scenario-based one, make sure that that's drafted before the solicitation is released That way you've got enough time built into the solicitation for vendors to actually answer the question that you really want to answer. And I know you guys planned that out ahead of time.
Yes, we did. We went to the team, we planned it out, we shared it with legal, we made sure we did everything, and we said, okay, how long do you think it should take them to get this done? And one of the things, too, we also wanted them not to phone home. We wanted them to bring to the oral presentation the people that are actually going to be able to answer these questions for us.
Awesome. I love it. This is not like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You do not get to phone a friend. Now, you let them prepare slides for your on-the-spot question. Not everyone does that, but you guys did here. What was it like getting that information out of them at the end, Carolyn?
Oh, so at the end, basically, we asked the quoters to email the slides for the on-the-spot questions to myself and the contract specialist while remaining on the team call, just to make sure they weren't swapping something out. And because the on-the-spot question was the last question, we were waiting at the end for a long time to get the email. Basically, we sat on Teams, watching the contractor, watching us wait for an email. This was a little bit awkward. So in the future, I would probably try to avoid this either by doing the on-the-spot question in the middle of the process or maybe by taking a screenshot of what was being shown.
All right, we've got another question here. Did you have any concerns with one small business being able to execute and respond during the oral presentation to such a big BPA with 5 functional areas?
No, because we knew that they were, the only reason why they were in the oral presentations, we made sure we only brought forward those small businesses that a lot of them all of them teamed together to bring forth the expertise for each functional area.
All right, I've got an on-the-spot question for you now. How did you do with teaming? Sometimes we've heard that different teams participate in different oral presentations. Did you have any language to prevent that here?
No, we did not.
And it wasn't an issue for you all?
It was not an issue for us.
Okay.
Thinking back to that the industry day, though, you asked some questions to make sure vendors could do this, right?
Yes, that was one of our questions. We thought about this in the lab, and we wanted to make sure that in practice that it can be done. And that's why we went to industry to make sure that, do you think this can be done? That's where we presented them the full statement of work to just say, here it is. Tell us what we got wrong.
Okay. And what did the vendors tell you during the industry day?
They said, right on, we can do it.
Awesome. During the planning phase, which we know we've talked about a lot here, was this oral presentation approach always the one that you had envisioned? Were there any concerns with it?
It was something I heard about, and I really wanted to bounce it off of the innovation lab to see how can we do it. Can we do it for something, to me, was this large? And it turned out that we could. And in moving forward, I don't think I will do it any other way.
Fantastic. This is your new favorite Thanksgiving side.
Absolutely.
Very cool. All right, we're moving on to slide 17 for those of you following along on the phone, and it looks like, David, we've got another protest issue here.
Oh man, yeah, that's right, Scott. Another protest, and this time it's about an issue that came up during oral presentations. And this one is actually kind of funny. So the program manager didn't meet the years of experience required by the solicitation. They actually pointed to the PM's LinkedIn page to try to show that he didn't have enough experience. Now, Scott, what did the GAO say about this issue?
Well, here the GAO started at the language in the solicitation because that's fundamental, right? Did the government do what they said they were going to do in the solicitation? And here the GAO looked at that bolded language, and this is technically what's called a weasel word. It was highly desired that the PM's resume demonstrate evidence of 15 or more years experience. Highly desired. Now the GAO doesn't call that a weasel word. We'll see what they say about it. This is a want. It's not a need. And the GAO said just that. The RFQ did not require the proposed PM to have a minimum level of experience. It was simply a stated preference. So there you go. That's what the GAO calls a weasel word for us. It's just a preferential word.
So if the PM had come in here and had 17 and a half years of experience as he did, the team could note that as something that increased their confidence. But if he didn't, then that was okay. They would just rate the PM accordingly.
Exactly. Carolyn, how did you treat this here?
So part of the issue here was if the experience listed was actually relevant experience, and the tech team just evaluated the relevance of the experience that was listed. They looked at it, they made a determination about if it was relevant, and in this particular case, they decided it was, that it was basically something that was up to the tech to evaluate.
That's right. It's up to it's again, flexibility. It's partly to do with the competence ratings and partly to do with that weasel word here, highly desired. When we talked about highly desired, did you have any concerns about putting that into the solicitation?
So it's interesting you asked that. We actually added this language based on a recommendation of the PIL, and when we were going through the review process, our attorney was expressed concern that the highly desired language meant we didn't actually have a minimum standard. And our response back to our attorney was, well, yes, we don't. That was by design. And here it actually ended up working greatly to our advantage.
I bet that attorney saw the protest come in and said, I know I can win this one. That's right. All right, we've got another poll coming up as we move on to slide 18 now. Whenever we're talking about oral presentations, we're talking about, is there a record? Is there a recording? And if so, what is that recording? So here, you used MS Teams for your oral presentations. What did you use as a record?
So we used Microsoft Teams, the recording, as the record, and we also had a backup of a couple of contract specialists taking notes.
Okay, so you had the formal one as the recording, the recording as the record, say that 5 times fast, and then you had a backup, and backup's always nice. Did anyone go back and re-watch the recording?
So I actually did. It was really helpful in reviewing the technical report to make sure it was consistent, and it was particularly helpful in writing my CEO statements of facts for the protest. You could definitely know if someone said something or not, and you could actually quote the timestamp in your report.
That is awesome. Now, I know that we're going to get a question about the enterprise contract, and I don't know what the F is for, file system. Everyone's out there using this. How did you upload it into ECFS?
It was actually uploaded pretty much like anything else. However, before we could upload it, we had to submit a help desk ticket to increase the file size limit. But once we did that, it worked just like any other large document.
But it did take a while.
It did still take a little while, partially because it was in September.
Yeah. So you can do it. You just talk to the help desk, and that's fine. Now, as we've talked about, I don't know if we've mentioned it or not, but you did get a protest on this. I don't know if you knew this. How did it work submitting the recording of the record to GAO as the record?
It actually worked out really well. GAO's submissions are now all online, so basically they have an online portal they submit everything to. And our attorney worked with our CIO customer to actually break the recordings into small zip files that met GAO's size limits. And we uploaded it in a bunch of little pieces. Our attorney was super careful here, so he started like 4 hours before the GAO filing deadline, but he was actually done in less than an hour. And our attorney was also available to help GAO figure out how to put the recording back together post-upload.
I know your attorney, and I know that it's way outside of his swim lane. He is an awesome IT guy as well as an awesome attorney. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, did you consider using a transcript via a recording of like the MS Teams? MS Teams has the option where you hit that start transcription button. Did you consider using that at the time?
We did consider it, and we actually experimented with it, but we ultimately didn't need it at this point.
Okay. And then someone else asks, how did you get the recording functionality turned on in Teams? Some people have that functionality, some people don't. How did you guys do that here?
That's a very technical question because of we have, S&T has their own subscription to Microsoft. We had the ability to enable that feature. Commonly, that feature is turned off, but we had the ability. We turned it on for this instance, and that's why we recorded and had the files available to us.
So the answer is, just like that old country song, you've got friends in high places.
Yes.
So, reach out to your help desk before you decide what your record or your recording is going to be. Reach out to your help desk, figure out what you can do. There's a comment here that transcripts can be expensive, but most MS teams do have that transcription feature that is available to you. You can turn on the transcription and it'll pop it out as a Word document or a PDF. Some teams like that a lot because you can use a search function like a Control F via having to rewatch the whole 3 hours or whatever else. And so again, it's up to you. Now, one thing I do want to remind everyone here is, again, we got to stay in our lane. So we are in 8.4 Federal Supply Schedules, right? And 8.4 does not actually contain the same language as 15.3. 15.3 says that an oral presentation has to have a record, and that record can be a recording, it can be notes, it can be your consensus. Here, 8.4 is silent on oral presentations and thus a record. The GAO recently ruled in Blueprint Consulting Services that a procurement conducted under 8.4 does not have to have a record, let alone a recording. But here, Carolyn and her team made the business decision to record the oral presentations, and that was the right decision for that team. They had a 3-hour oral presentation. They had 5 different functional areas. They had 5 evaluators. That was just the right decision for them. So when you go and have your first oral presentation, if it's an 8.4, you have that flexibility of whether we want to have a record, and if we do, what is that record going to be? And you can make that business decision for your team at the time. You've got lots of flexibility. All right, we've got another poll coming up here.
We have it up, Scott.
Well, all right then.
All right, let's go over the results for this one. So the question was, FAR 8.4 requires which of the following to serve as the oral presentation record? And select all that applies. The first one was nothing, and we had a bunch of people that said nothing on there. And then we have video, audio recording, about 30%, 35%, 18% transcription, 33% the evaluation report, and 18% was the written note itself. But just like you just heard, there's nothing in FAR 8.4 that tells us what it has to be. Obviously, if you want to look at some examples that are in the FAR, that's under FAR 15, but that's not required. It doesn't carry over to FAR 8.4 itself.
We do have a really important question in the chat from a friend of the PIL. PIL alumni Matthew Stanberry asks, do you need consent to record or transcribe? Did either of you talk about that with your legal?
So we did talk about it, and we put a notice in basically in the RFQ saying by participating you consent.
There you go. So different states have different laws. Make sure to talk with your attorney about if you're going to record what those laws are in your state. You do not want to be accused of wiretapping or any of those other things at the end of your, that is a whole different kind of protest. So talk about that beforehand, but there's lots of safeguards in place that you can do it with.
So while we're on this, I guess for the teams itself, now, did you require the contractors to have video on during the oral presentations, or how did that work with your team? And same with your team as well. Did you have the evaluators camera on, camera off? What did that look like?
Okay, so for the government side, we basically had either me or the contract specialist or whoever was talking with our camera on. The evaluators were not on camera because they were meant to be anonymous evaluators. For the quoters, they were on camera generally the whole time unless they were having an IT issue. Usually they just did the speaker, which was fine. And we also actually had them stay on Teams while they were preparing the on-the-spot questions so we could verify that they hadn't brought in any additional people.
I like that approach. That's nice. It's very nuanced. Now, David, I think we have maybe another protest issue coming up here.
That's right. Yes, we do. And so this is one last protest that we have. And the protest issue here is one involving pricing. And there's a poll up right now. So be sure to answer this poll question here about when must you submit a protest for pricing. Now, the solicitation included an Excel spreadsheet for vendors to complete and return. The solicitation said that vendors were free to quote alternate labor categories or alternate labor hours, so as long as those vendors propose the minimum number of people to fill the positions. Here, for at least one position, the processor included zero. So the government found that their price quote was non-responsive. Now, what did GAO have to say about this, Scott? Did they find a hole in the third down?
I love the football reference. I don't know who Dallas or the Commanders are playing here, but, you know, Thanksgiving and football. Nope, no luck on this one either. The protester didn't comply with the terms of the solicitation. They could have quoted 1 FTE. They could have quoted a half. They could have quoted a quarter. But by quoting 0, they didn't meet that minimum, and so they were removed. You know, the government has to do what they said they were going to do in the solicitation, and vendors have to do the same thing. Carolyn, how did you all come up with the minimums, and was it for every labor category or just some?
So it was not for every labor category. We actually spent a lot of time discussing this in requirements development. We wanted to allow contractors to submit an alternate labor approach if they thought it would be innovative or bring about efficiencies, but there were minimum requirements. So what we put in as the minimums were really what was required to meet the government needs.
And that's a really nice approach. You didn't have like this buckshot of everyone is required. You had it that you could change certain ones as long as they explained it, but you had to meet it somehow. It's a really nice nuanced approach. And I remember when this issue came up, we have our biweekly meeting, and it was really strange to have a compliance issue at the very end when we're looking at price. And we went back and forth in discussing, what are we going to do about this? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, I definitely remember a lot of the back and forth because it's not really when you expect to see a compliance issue. And we were thinking about, should we, since we're at this stage, be just trying to evaluate a proposal that wasn't fully compliant? But then we didn't really know what to write. So ultimately, we really determined that the contractor didn't meet the minimum requirement, and the most logical and defensible way to deal with that was to treat this like the compliance issue it was, and that's what we did. And GAO ultimately agreed with us.
Now, this was the last GAO issue that we brought up here, but it was actually the first one that GAO handled in the protest decision, and they go through it really quickly. It's about 2 pages. They don't really have too much of an issue here. The vendor was not compliant. They were removed. So instead of really 5 quoters in phase 3, there were 4 because one of them was removed from the trade-off. And the GAO says, denied. That is okay. The bulk of the issues are spent on the other protester, and it is a great case. If you have just one case you're going to read between now and Thanksgiving, or you're looking for some light Thanksgiving reading, I highly recommend this case because it is beautiful. David, let's go over the poll.
All right, poll 6. If a vendor has an objection to the price submission instructions in the solicitation, when do they need to submit a protest? So let's see, for A, we had a few people that said before the solicitation is released. No one said that after the solicitation before award, though. While the solicitation is open, almost everyone got that one right, and then no one said after issues the award. So great job, you guys. I think everyone just about got that.
All right, we need to come up with tougher questions for the next time. We've got a lot of smart folks in the line today. We do have a very smart question, too, from Tasha. Were either of the protesters an incumbent by chance?
Both of the protesters were incumbents.
And see, this is one of the things, when you're consolidating, you've got more incumbents, and so there's more chance for that, and you just have to do what you said you're going to do and move through it, but great question. All right, we're moving on to slide 20 now, and Carolyn, one thing that you mentioned when we were preparing for this webinar is how fast you thought the evaluation went.
Yeah, so basically phase 1 took 2 days. Phase 2 took about 2 weeks, and phase 3 was about 10 days for the technical evaluation.
And what do you credit with having, helping it to go so fast?
I think we had our schedules blocked off, and we had a very motivated, awesome team.
So it sounds like you'd go back to planning.
Indeed.
I love the P word. Now, 2 days, 2 weeks, 10 days, is that a record for you? That is super fast.
So this is actually the first time I did it, but it seemed very fast, so I hope to repeat.
All right. Now, something we didn't talk about is how you evaluated phase 3. So tell us about that. We see that you got it done in 10 days. How did you evaluate phase 3?
So we basically made an entire day of the evaluation for each quoter. We gathered the evaluation team the morning of the oral presentation, and we looked at the key personnel resume, evaluated that, and then we logged on to the team's calls to listen to the oral presentation. After 3 hours of oral presentations, we took a break for lunch. Then we moved into an on-the-spot consensus, and basically we didn't log off until we were done. So then we moved on the next day to the next quarter.
How long did it take you to evaluate in the afternoon? You said you didn't log off until you were done. Did you have late days, or did it go pretty fast?
I believe it really depended on quarters, probably somewhere between like 2 hours and 4 hours.
Okay, that's not so bad considering a 3-hour oral presentation. And I love that you had the planning call before the oral presentation actually started up again. You all and the planning is fantastic. I just think that's a great thing to do. And you took an hour for lunch. Tell me more about that. Sometimes we say go right into the consensus, but you all had lunch first.
Yeah, we did, and I would absolutely do it that way again because we were timing everything and managing the entire process, and because I was talking most of the time and couldn't really move, it was good for me to have a break before I helped everyone focus on the consensus, and I think it helped the evaluators clear their heads and really not come into it hungry and want to leave.
Yeah, you definitely need to have fuel for the brain. You don't want to clear your head too much. You want to retain all of that that juicy oral presentation goodness, but sometimes standing up, walking away, getting a sandwich, and then coming back fresh, sometimes it's just what you needed. Now, we talked about slides, too, and how you got the slides through and having slides for each. How did you treat slides when it came to your evaluation of them?
Yeah, so the slides were only used as reference materials, and they were not evaluated.
Yep. Great.
We reminded the TET that they could not evaluate them multiple times in the process, and that they couldn't evaluate something that was on the slides and not discussed, and they did a good job with that.
Fantastic, because like I said, you don't want those quoters to cram a whole bunch of information on there that you have to evaluate, so stating up front that they're just for reference. I love that idea, stating that they're just for reference. That gives you a bit of weasel room. If there's something that was on the slide that they talked about for just a second and you think it's important, okay. But if there's something on the slide, they didn't talk about it at all, sorry, that's not being evaluated. And Garth, how did the phase 3 evaluation go for you?
Again, we loved it. I think it went very well. We spent a lot of time having thoughtful questions, thinking about every aspect of it, and making sure that we utilize the time allotted to them and the limitations allotted to the contractors as well for our evaluation.
And what did it mean for you all to get back to your job so fast after 2 weeks and 10 days?
Yeah, all the subject matter experts, they have large teams. They had a lot of items that they needed to work on. So we really wanted to focus on getting through this process as efficiently and effectively as possible so they can go back on doing the mission of S&T.
Yeah, we got a question in the chat. When was the actual award date made? The evaluation was super fast. After that, there were a few hiccups. Carolyn.
So the actual award date was in March. I believe it was March 25th. And then we got 2 protests, which resolved in July. And we actually made the award to start August 1st. So it was about 3 weeks after the protests were resolved.
Yeah, and so there was a long time in the documentation there. The evaluations were super fast. There were some road bumps, and you moved through them, and you've got some lessons learned for next time that maybe we'll talk about when we get to the takeaway. Michael asks, too, how's performance going now?
It's going pretty well. They're working on consolidating or getting all the staff on board and meeting our task orders as we submit them.
Yeah, they've only been on contract for a couple of months now. Really not a lot of information to say. Michael, ask us again next year. We'll have a great answer for you with one of our one-year post-award interviews maybe.
Here you go. Did you get some cost savings by awarding to a new vendor?
We actually did. We got substantial cost savings by awarding this way.
That's awesome. Well, after any 8.4 award, the CO has to provide that brief explanation of award. How'd that work for you here, Carolyn?
Yeah, we did an oral brief explanation. What we did was we sent an award notification letter that was written, just telling the unsuccessful quoters that they were not selected, the evaluation results for them and the awardees, and telling them that they could request an oral brief explanation. All 4 actually did request the oral brief explanation. We told them they were allowed to submit questions in advance, which they did. We told them the questions would be answered at CO discretion. And then once we had the questions, we actually coordinated our script with OGC, and the script actually included the evaluation process, ratings, a summary of the trade-off decision, and then answers to the questions that we decided were appropriate to answer.
I love that idea here of having questions submitted early. I think that's just so innovative. I think there's a lot of fear around oral presentations because you're unsure like what questions are going to come up. So giving them that opportunity to ask questions early, which isn't required under a brief explanation, right? That's one of the debriefing requirements, but it's a good practice, right? You want to be able to answer questions. It's a great thing. You can answer them early, and then highlighting what you said at the end, you can answer those ones that are appropriate. And so those ones that are inappropriate, you can just ignore and move along and, oh, sorry, we don't have time for those. What did you do with the vendors from phase 2? You had 21 vendors we figured out with math that were not advised to proceed forward. What happened with those ones with their brief explanations?
So we actually offered them feedback once we completed phase 3, but none of them requested it.
There you go. So it's always a best practice to advise, to offer that informal feedback. They're not expected to get a brief explanation or a debrief, whatever parts are in, because they didn't go through the whole process, but giving them that option to have informal feedback is really important. David, I think we've got a poll up.
That's right, we do. So what information do you provide vendors as part of the brief explanation process? So select all that apply. So it says a summary of why they were not selected. Okay, good amount of people said that. The winning vendor pricing, maybe that's done as the notice to offers that the award is made. Oral brief explanation of the award. Not many people selected that one, which is interesting. And their individual technical evaluation report, again, a low number on that, 27%. That is a best practice that we recommend doing for actions. And I have never provided a brief explanation before. So we have 28 people, about 16% that says that. Now we do have a couple questions in the chat. Do we have time to take those? I think they'd be pretty quick here, Scott.
All right, let's see here. The first one was, do you think you ended up picking the best vendor?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too, but ask us again in a year.
There you go. How easy or difficult was the phase in, phase out stage, that transition for the new award when they've got so many different new functional areas to cover?
Yes, now that was the most difficult part. You need to really plan. If I had to do it all over again, we would have to plan a little bit better for that. But again, there was a lot of external circumstances that ate away at our transition plan. So,
how much did you have planned originally?
We had about a month of
1 to 2 months, yeah.
1 to 2 months of transition, but you know, timing, extending of contracts, working through all of those, there was a lot of logistics in this.
Yep.
Got it.
Now, after all of our PIL engagements, we reach out to those vendors that participated, both the winners and the losers, as well as the government participants, those evaluators, and we talk to them about how did the innovations go. And we normally interview between 25 and 50% of the vendors, and here we got some great comments. And remember, these are all from small businesses. The first one says, the draft solicitations are helpful because it's forewarned us. Don't have a black hole. If you're not going to engage industry via an RFI or an industry day, at least have that draft solicitation so that they can see what's coming out and start to prepare. It's so important for them. The next one, the evaluation process was very effective. I like the idea of the multiple phases. It really helps small businesses with limited resources and can get us on to the next proposal. This goes back, this was one of the innovations that Carolyn used to really engage with small businesses, having that multi-phased approach. Not all businesses have the $100,000 or $200,000 to submit a full proposal. But if they can get, $10,000 and get some feedback on that and know that they're going to be successful, that gives them the green light to spend that big money and do a full proposal or participate in an oral presentation, which, isn't cheap either. So having that multi-phased approach is really helpful for small business. And the last one, shorter is better if you can. We're always evaluating the opportunity cost of responding versus other things. Breaking up the front end into shorter, doable doses, so helpful. That goes back to having those 13 pages for phase 2, having that 1 page for phase 1, and just a 3-hour oral presentation for phase 2. So small business really liked this approach. Well, that's just about going to do it, but just like Thanksgiving, we're all going to take some leftovers home. Gar, do you have any takeaways that you'd tell people about?
Yes, always plan for more time. Have a backup to the backup. I really cannot speak highly enough more about the partnership with the PIL and with OPO and oral presentations. I love it.
Thanks, Garth. Thanks for being with us today. Carolyn, how about you?
Yeah, so I think I have 2. On-the-spot consensus was terrific for this team. It saved us a lot of time, and it made record keeping much easier in the protest. Basically, we wrote our consensus while we were on the Teams call, and there weren't back and forth emails or any other documentation we had to turn over. And I also think that teamwork really helped us out here. I can't say enough great things about the team I had. I had my entire branch help with reference checks, but I also had expert consults from all over the place, from other OPO team members, from policy, from OGC, from security, and I had an evaluation team that was very ready to jump into these PIL techniques. So I was amazed at how much we were able to get done.
I just think that this team did amazing with the planning, with the communication, with thinking about how to engage small business. Awesome innovations here, awesome result. David, take us home.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, David Ritter, Carolyn, Garth, and the hundreds of you here today for joining us for our 67th PIL webinar. We have 2 final polls for you to take, which will help us in improving our classes in the future. Please be sure to take these 2 polls and after the class, take the survey that you'll receive from CSOT as well. Also, our next PIL webinar will be coming up on December 15th, so be on the lookout for an announcement soon. Now, just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, you must sign in with your full name, DHS email address, using the chat pod to receive CLP credit today. So if you haven't done that, make sure to enter your email address in now. We have our PILcast series, which is available out on YouTube. So be sure to check it out. We have 10 minutes or less episodes talking about different procurement innovation techniques that are great you can find if you need a quick bite-sized information on a lot of techniques that are out there. So if you please visit our PIL homepage, you're going to find recorded webinars with the corresponding documents. This will be uploaded today within the next few days or so with all the documents that we had today as well, so you can watch this. There's other useful resources, your component acquisition innovation advocates like Chad Parker that was on today. You can also submit ideas for innovation as well with innovation competitions and find the PIL YouTube page in our PILcast series. And as we're speaking of idea competition, be sure to check out, we have a few idea competitions that are being reviewed right now. One that's underway at CBP that'll be closing soon here. And also, if you have any ideas that you need and you think could be used on a crowdsourcing platform, any problems that you think could be solved, be sure to submit an idea for that, and we can work with you to really hash out that idea competition. Here we have, if you're interested in earning your Digi Badge, you can attend 5 webinars and apply 1 innovation technique, or just attend a PIL bootcamp class. You can also you can find that by submitting on our homepage. If you need help, you can submit a PIL 1-pager where you can request formal PIL coaching support right on our DHS Connect page. Now, we have 1 more PIL bootcamp class that reserved just for DHS and industry that will be on November 15th, and 1 more PIL bootcamp the next level. So be sure to log into CSOT today to register if you have not taken a PIL Bootcamp class or PIL Bootcamp Next Level class. And you can go into CSOT or YouTube, you can watch a 1-hour oral presentation condensed of the PIL Bootcamp called the PIL Bootcamp Primer. And you also, if you need any samples out there, go to the FAI.gov Periodic Table of Acquisition Innovation. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar next month. Bye, everyone.